Every great achievement in history began with an idea, and the resilience to carry that idea forward despite failure, rejection, or fear. The truth is, talent can give you a head start, but it's discipline and mental toughness that keep you in the race. When we talk about training the mind to never quit, we're not speaking about blind stubbornness. We're talking about cultivating an internal belief system, one that is stronger than the external obstacles you will inevitably face. So what does it actually mean to train your mind? It doesn't happen by chance, and it doesn't happen overnight. Just like a muscle, the mind responds to repetition, to focused practice, to adversity, and most importantly, to reflection. It starts with understanding that the mind is not fixed. It is malleable. And like any part of us, it can be conditioned for resilience. The first principle is awareness. You cannot conquer what you do not recognize. Most people quit not because they've reached their limit, but because they believe they've reached their limit. The voice that tells you you're not good enough or this is too hard is not fact, it's fear. And fear often disguises itself as logic. You must learn to catch that voice early. When you hear it, pause and ask, is this real or is this resistance? Because often it's the moment just before the breakthrough when your mind begs you to quit. Second, develop a why that is deeper than any, how challenges will come. Failure is inevitable, but purpose is the antidote to pain. When you know why you're doing what you're doing, quitting becomes irrelevant. Purpose gives meaning to the struggle. If your mission is meaningful enough, no setback can convince you to stop. Third, train in discomfort. Growth lives in friction, not ease. If you only work hard when you feel good, you'll never reach your potential. Real training happens when you don't want to show up, but you show up anyway. That's where the transformation happens, not just physically, but mentally. Every time you overcome the urge to stop, you're rewiring your brain. You're teaching it, I finish what I start. Fourth, eliminate perfectionism. Many quit not because they can't continue, but because they didn't meet their impossible standard. Remember, the goal is not perfection, it's progress. If you fail but keep going, you are still winning. Consistency over time beats intensity in the moment. So stop aiming for flawless, aim for relentless. And lastly, surround yourself with the right environment. We are tribal creatures. Our brains are shaped by those around us. If your environment glorifies quitting, you'll absorb that message. But if you're in a space that normalizes effort, persistence, and grit, you'll begin to reflect those same values. Your environment should hold you accountable to your higher self, not your comfort zone. Training your mind to never quit isn't about turning into a robot. It's about learning how to lead yourself through challenge, to stand tall when your legs tremble, to move forward when fear tells you to freeze. It's about knowing that your mind, when trained with awareness, purpose, resilience, and community, can carry you far beyond what you thought was possible. The world doesn't need more people who start strong. It needs people who finish well. And that starts with how you think, what you believe, and how deeply you've trained your mind to never quit. Fufkoines, oftis pech. Mental toughness is not a trait. It is a trained skill that grows through intentional practice and repeated exposure to discomfort. Self-awareness is the foundation of mental strength. Recognizing limiting beliefs is the first step to overcoming them. A powerful sense of purpose can override pain, fear, and failure. It becomes the fuel that keeps you going when motivation fades. Consistency beats intensity. Progress matters more than perfection, and resilience is built by showing up, especially when it's hard. The people and environment around you shape your endurance. Align yourself with those who challenge and inspire you to keep going. Mental toughness is not a trait. It is a trained skill that grows through intentional practice and repeated exposure to discomfort. Many people think that resilience is something you're either born with or without, that it's an inborn quality reserved for elite athletes, successful entrepreneurs, or people who seem naturally driven. But that belief is not only misleading, it's limiting. The reality is that mental toughness is not a fixed trait. It's not something that some people have and others don't. Instead, it's a capacity that can be built. Just like physical strength, it responds to training, repetition, challenge, and consistency. It requires effort, awareness, and time. And more than anything, it requires a willingness to be uncomfortable. If you look at people who appear mentally strong, you'll often find that they have one thing in common. They've put themselves in situations where they were forced to grow. They didn't become strong by avoiding stress, failure, or challenge. They became strong by walking through those things often again and again, learning to stay steady even when everything around them was uncertain. That's where real growth begins. Not in success, but in struggle. It's easy to feel confident when everything is going your way. It's when things start to fall apart that your mental training gets tested. Every time you're faced with a difficult decision, a painful setback, or a demanding challenge, you're given a chance to train. And that training begins with how you respond in those moments. Do you react emotionally and give up? Or do you pause, breathe, and continue moving forward, even if it's just one small step? Those micro decisions are the building blocks of mental toughness. They are the quiet moments that most people ignore, but that ultimately shape the kind of mindset you carry into the world. The mind, like the body, adapts to stress. When you lift weights, you're tearing muscle fibers so that they can rebuild stronger. When you face discomfort, resistance, or hardship and choose to stay in it rather than run from it, you're doing the same thing to your mind. You're building mental fibers that can withstand more next time. The more you do this, the stronger you get. But if you constantly avoid pain or back out when things get hard, you train your mind to retreat. You teach it to fear challenge rather than embrace it. The problem is most of us are raised to believe that comfort equals success. We are conditioned to seek safety, to avoid risk, and to chase ease. But nothing truly meaningful or fulfilling is built in ease. The life you want, the goals you've set, the version of you that you dream of becoming, that all lives on the other side of difficulty. And to reach it, your mind has to be trained to tolerate the struggle that will get you there. This doesn't mean you have to live in constant suffering. It means you must become familiar with discomfort so it no longer controls you. When you choose to wake up early and do the work even when you're tired, you train your mind. When you continue working on a project after multiple failures, you train your mind. When you face rejection and keep going, you train your mind. These aren't random acts. They are daily opportunities to reinforce a mindset that doesn't collapse under pressure. Training mental toughness isn't glamorous. It happens in small moments when no one is watching, when no one is cheering, when giving up would be easier and more convenient. But it's in those moments that your character is shaped. You start to realize that it's not about being fearless. It's about being committed. Fear doesn't disappear with strength. It's your relationship to it that changes. Strong minds don't avoid fear. They learn to move with it. They learn to keep going despite it. It also helps to track your progress just as you would in the gym. Pay attention to how your reactions change over time. Maybe 6 months ago, a rejection would have crushed you. Now it stings, but you recover faster. That's growth. That's mental training working. And the more you notice it, the more you believe in your ability to endure. That belief, built through repetition and exposure, becomes your armor. The biggest mistake people make is waiting to feel ready. You don't train your mind by thinking about change. You train it by doing the hard thing even when you're not ready, especially when you're not ready. Every time you override that voice telling you to stop, you're proving to yourself that you are in control, not your emotions, not your fear, not your past you. And once you know that, you carry that power into everything you do. Self-awareness is the foundation of mental strength. Recognizing limiting beliefs is the first step to overcoming them. The way we talk to ourselves, the stories we tell in our minds, and the thoughts we choose to believe form the blueprint for how we behave under pressure. If that inner dialogue is filled with doubt, fear, or defeat, then no matter how capable we are, we will constantly sabotage our own progress. The mind doesn't just process external events, it creates meaning out of them. And if we don't become conscious of what that meaning is, we will be ruled by a narrative that we didn't choose and don't even realize is there. The truth is, most of us carry mental scripts that were written long ago by parents, teachers, culture experiences. I'm not good enough. I always mess things up. I don't have what it takes. These thoughts often sound like facts because they've been repeated so many times. But repetition doesn't make something true. It makes it familiar. And familiarity has a way of slipping into our identity. If we don't pause and examine those beliefs, they start to feel like who we are rather than what we've learned. Mental strength starts by questioning the automatic thoughts that run through our minds, especially during stress. When something goes wrong, do we immediately think, I knew I'd fail? When someone rejects us, do we hear, I'm not worthy? These responses feel instinctive, but they're actually programmed reactions. And like any program, they can be rewritten, but only if we become aware that they exist. Self-awareness means observing our thoughts without judgment and asking, is this belief serving me or limiting me? Is this a fact or just a habit of thinking? This process isn't always comfortable. It requires honesty. It requires slowing down. And it requires the willingness to be wrong about ourselves. Sometimes the hardest part of growth isn't the challenge itself. It's letting go of the identity we've clung to for safety. A person who has always believed they're not a leader might unconsciously avoid opportunities to lead, not because they can't, but because their mind has been trained to reject that role. The power lies in recognizing that belief and choosing to challenge it. One of the most practical ways to build self-awareness is through reflection. Not just thinking about what happened in a day, but actively analyzing how we reacted, what thoughts came up, and whether those thoughts were aligned with our goals or working against them. Writing them down can help. Saying them out loud can help even more. Once we bring those beliefs into the open, we take away their power. We create space between the thought and the reaction, and in that space, we find freedom to choose a different response. Another key part of awareness is emotional regulation. When we're triggered or overwhelmed, our minds default to the easiest path, the old belief, the comfortable excuse, the familiar fear. But if we can notice that trigger in the moment, if we can breathe and say, I see what's happening here, we gain the ability to interrupt the pattern. That one moment of recognition is often enough to keep us from quitting, from spiraling, from letting that belief dictate the next decision. And the more often we do it, the stronger that awareness becomes. Awareness also helps us separate who we are from what we feel. You might feel afraid, but that doesn't mean you're weak. You might feel uncertain, but that doesn't mean you're incapable. The problem is we tend to fuse emotion with identity. Instead of saying, I'm feeling anxious, we say, I am anxious. That shift in language may seem small, but it changes everything. Emotions are temporary. Identity is lasting. The more aware we become of that difference, the less power those emotions hold over us. The mind, when left untrained, defaults to survival. It wants safety, familiarity, and comfort. But growth requires uncertainty, discomfort, and challenge. When we become aware of that conflict, we can begin to work with it rather than be controlled by it. We stop reacting out of fear and start responding with intention. And in that shift, we begin to reclaim our power. It's also important to realize that self-awareness is not a one-time breakthrough. It's a practice. Some days you'll catch yourself early. Other days, you'll fall into old patterns. But every time you choose to observe rather than react, you're strengthening that internal muscle. You're proving to yourself that you are not your thoughts. You are the one noticing them. That separation is where change begins. By cultivating this awareness consistently, you stop being a passive passenger in your own mind. You become the driver. And that control, that clarity, that ability to recognize and release what no longer serves you becomes the foundation on which real, lasting mental strength is built. A powerful sense of purpose can override pain, fear, and failure. It becomes the fuel that keeps you going when motivation fades. When everything is working in your favor, when the path is clear and the progress is visible, it's easy to stay motivated. But those moments are temporary. The real test comes when progress stalls, when criticism stings, when setbacks multiply, and when the doubts in your mind grow louder than the support around you. In those moments, motivation fades, energy dips, and the question arises, why am I even doing this? If your answer isn't rooted in something meaningful, it becomes very easy to quit. Purpose gives meaning to the struggle. It turns obstacles into part of the process rather than signs that you're on the wrong path. When you have a strong sense of why you're doing what you're doing, pain becomes manageable, fear becomes less threatening, and failure becomes just another step forward. Purpose doesn't remove hardship. It gives you a reason to endure it. It reminds you that the discomfort you're experiencing is not pointless. It's part of something bigger than you. It ties your efforts to a deeper cause. And that connection is what sustains long-term resilience. Many people chase goals without ever understanding why those goals matter to them. They aim for success, recognition, or money because that's what the world applauds. But when the challenges show up, and they always do, those external motivations aren't strong enough to hold you in the fight. You need something personal, something internal. Purpose is not about what you want to achieve. It's about what you're willing to sacrifice for. It's what you're committed to even when the outcome is uncertain. It's the emotional anchor that keeps you grounded when everything else feels unstable. The most powerful purposes are rooted in service, something beyond just your own success. When your purpose involves making a difference, contributing to others, or standing for something bigger than your comfort, you develop a type of internal strength that is not easily shaken. That strength doesn't rely on whether people believe in you, whether the path is smooth, or whether you feel good. It's driven by commitment, not convenience. And that difference matters. Motivation is a feeling. Purpose is a decision. When you train your mind to return to purpose instead of comfort, you create a kind of psychological endurance. You can face rejection and keep going. You can fail and learn rather than quit. You can feel exhausted and still find the strength to show up. Because your mind isn't focused on how hard it is. It's focused on why it's worth it. That's the mindset shift that separates those who endure from those who surrender. It's not about talent or luck or even discipline. It's about clarity of purpose. But purpose doesn't usually arrive fully formed. It is uncovered, not assigned. It grows through action, reflection, and experience. You discover what matters most to you by paying attention to what energizes you, what angers you, what challenges you to rise. You find it in the moments when you forget about time because you're so focused on what you're doing. You find it in the areas where you're willing to struggle because the outcome feels deeply meaningful. Once you discover that, you have something more powerful than a goal. You have a direction that guides your life. That direction becomes your compass in the hardest seasons. When you lose, when you feel alone, when everything seems to push you backwards, purpose keeps you centered. It whispers, this is not the end, this is part of it. That quiet voice can be louder than fear if you learn to listen to it. But it takes intention. It takes reminding yourself daily why you started and why it matters. Purpose isn't a one-time inspiration. It's a practice of reconnecting to what you believe in. People who seem unstoppable aren't immune to struggle. They just have something pulling them forward that's stronger than the forces trying to pull them back. Their minds are trained not to seek escape, but to seek alignment. They don't waste energy on asking whether it's worth it. They already decided that long ago. And that decision is what gives them the strength to continue when most would walk away. Purpose rewires your perception of effort. What used to feel like a burden starts to feel like a responsibility. Not something forced upon you, but something you willingly carry because it matters. It gives you meaning, and in that meaning, you find energy that discipline alone could never produce. Your body might get tired. Your heart might get discouraged. But if your mind is trained to return to purpose, you will never truly quit. You might pause. You might fall. But you will always get back up. Because you're not just chasing a result, you're honoring a mission. Consistency beats intensity. Progress matters more than perfection. And resilience is built by showing up, especially when it's hard. In a world that glorifies quick success, dramatic transformations, and overnight victories, we often forget the power of steady effort. It's tempting to chase moments of high energy, to wait for inspiration, or to act only when we feel motivated. But mental strength isn't built in those peaks of excitement. It's built in the valleys, in the slow grind, in the repetition of small acts done consistently over time. The truth is, anyone can show up when it's easy. The ones who last are those who show up when it's not. The problem with chasing intensity is that it relies too much on emotion. One day you're on fire, ready to take on the world, setting huge goals and attacking them with full force. But what happens when that fire dims? What happens on the days when you're tired, unmotivated, or discouraged? If your mindset is built only for sprints, you'll burn out. You'll quit, not because you're incapable, but because you never built the endurance to keep going without the emotional high. That's why consistency is so powerful. It doesn't depend on how you feel. It depends on the decision to keep going. Progress isn't always visible. Sometimes you show up day after day, and it seems like nothing is changing. But what you can't see is the foundation being built beneath the surface. Every rep at the gym, every early morning, every extra effort, it all compounds. Growth is rarely dramatic. It's often quiet, slow, and invisible until it becomes undeniable. That's why the people who stay consistent, even when the results are delayed, develop a kind of unshakable confidence. They know their effort matters. They've proven to themselves that they can be trusted to keep going no matter what. When we aim for perfection, we set ourselves up for disappointment. One mistake feels like failure. One mistake feels like the end. But when we focus on progress, we learn to see every step, even the imperfect ones, as part of the journey. You don't have to get everything right. You just have to keep going. That mindset gives you the freedom to fall without giving up. You can stumble, adapt, and continue without losing sight of your goal. The key is not in being flawless. It's in being faithful to the process. Consistency also builds identity. Every time you do the hard thing when it's inconvenient, you're telling yourself, this is who I am. You stop needing to rely on motivation because you've built discipline into your habits. It becomes automatic. You don't think about whether you feel like showing up. You just do it because that's what you do. That repetition shapes your self-image. And once your identity aligns with your behavior, everything becomes easier. You stop negotiating with yourself every day. You just act. Most people wait for the perfect moment to start. But the perfect moment never comes. Life is messy, unpredictable, and often overwhelming. If you wait for things to settle down, you'll never build consistency. The most powerful step is the one taken in chaos. When you choose to move forward in the middle of the storm, you prove to yourself that external conditions don't control your actions. That's how mental strength grows, not in comfort, but in commitment. We all have days when we don't feel like it. Days when doubt creeps in, when failure knocks us down, or when the weight of life feels too heavy. But those are the exact days when consistency matters most. Anyone can work hard when everything is perfect. But the real test is whether you can stay in the game when it's not. Resilience isn't built by pushing hard once. It's built by refusing to stop, by showing up again and again, especially when you don't want to. Sometimes the most important progress is simply not quitting. You may not always win. You may not always succeed, but if you stay consistent, you outlast the excuses, the fear, and the setbacks. You develop a quiet confidence, one built not on flashes of brilliance, but on a long trail of effort. And that trail, even if messy, even if imperfect, leads to strength that can't be shaken. Success often comes down to those who are willing to repeat the basics when everyone else gets bored. The fundamentals are never exciting, but they work. And those who master them, who show up daily, who stay consistent through failure and fatigue, those are the ones who ultimately win. Not because they were the best from the start, but because they never stopped moving forward. The people and environment around you shape your endurance. Align yourself with those who challenge and inspire you to keep going. Human beings are inherently social creatures. From birth, we are wired to absorb behavior, language, and values from those around us. Whether we realize it or not, our thoughts, habits, and attitudes are constantly being influenced by our surroundings. That means mental strength is not just an individual pursuit, it is also a collective outcome. If you place a strong person in a weak environment for long enough, eventually their strength will erode. And if you place someone struggling in a powerful, encouraging, and disciplined environment, you will see transformation. The people you spend time with either water your growth or slowly dry it out. When it comes to building a mindset that never quits, one of the most important yet overlooked elements is your circle. The energy, language, and attitude of your peers silently shape your standards. If you're surrounded by people who normalize quitting, who always look for the easiest route, who complain about effort or mock ambition, it becomes very hard to stay committed to your path. Their beliefs start to sound reasonable. Their doubts begin to echo your own. Over time, you might start questioning whether your goals are too big, whether pushing through discomfort is even worth it, or whether success is really meant for someone like you. But the opposite is also true. Surround yourself with people who value growth, who respect discipline, and who believe in pushing limits, and your mindset begins to shift. In that kind of environment, Struggle isn't something to avoid, it's something to embrace. You begin to associate resilience with strength, not suffering. You start to see challenges as necessary steps rather than cruel barriers. Their courage reinforces yours. Their consistency reminds you to keep going. And their support becomes a shield when doubt tries to creep in. It's important to understand that influence doesn't always come through loud words. Often it's subtle. It's in how the people around you respond to failure. It's in whether they make excuses or take ownership. It's in how they talk about their goals, their past, and their dreams. Do they speak with hope or resignation? Do they encourage progress or settle for comfort? These micro messages shape your psychology far more than you may notice. That's why being intentional with your environment is not a luxury. It's a necessity. Sometimes that means making hard choices. It means distancing yourself from relationships that drain your ambition or discourage your persistence. It means seeking out communities, mentors, or friends who live with the values you want to embody. You don't need to cut people out harshly, but you do need to protect your mindset. If someone's presence constantly triggers doubt, comparison, or fear, you must limit the influence they have over your mental space. You only have so much energy. You have to be deliberate about who gets access to it. There's also great power in proximity. When you see someone doing what you once thought was impossible, your beliefs expand. When you witness perseverance in real time, someone failing and getting back up, someone grinding when no one's watching, it gives you a model to follow. You stop asking, can I do this? And start asking, how can I do this? That shift in mindset is everything because belief is contagious. And being close to someone who refuses to quit makes it harder for you to justify giving up. You also need accountability. Being surrounded by people who expect you to show up doesn't make you weak. It makes you responsible. When you're part of a group, a team, or a partnership where people are watching your effort, you naturally elevate your standards. You think twice before giving in to laziness or fear because you know someone else is counting on your strength. That shared commitment, that unspoken agreement to keep going, becomes a force stronger than momentary discomfort. Even if you're working alone, you can build an intentional environment through the content you consume, the habits you create, and the examples you study. Books, podcasts, videos, and routines can all serve as part of your mental environment. Every input matters. Every voice you allow into your headspace either builds your resolve or chips away at it. Train yourself to choose wisely. If you want to think strong, you need to surround yourself with strength in every form. Endurance isn't built in isolation. It is forged through connection, through belonging, and through shared effort. We don't grow best alone. We grow best when we are supported, challenged, and inspired by others who are also on the path. You don't need perfect people around you. You need real ones, people who push through fear, who own their mistakes, who keep showing up no matter what. That kind of environment doesn't just help you endure. It transforms you. Training your mind to never quit is not about forcing yourself to be fearless or pretending that challenges don't hurt. It's about building a mindset that can bend but not break, one that finds strength in purpose, clarity in awareness, and power in consistency. It's about recognizing that mental toughness is not a gift. It's a skill that anyone can build one decision at a time. And just like any form of strength, it grows through discomfort, through repetition, and through the influence of the right people. When your thoughts are aligned with your purpose, when you learn to quiet the noise of doubt, and when you surround yourself with voices that push you forward, quitting stops being an option. You stop looking for the exit and start looking for the next step. You begin to trust yourself not just when it's easy, but especially when it's hard. Because in the end, it's not the loudest, the fastest, or even the most talented who rise. It's the ones who keep going, the ones who stay. The ones who